Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Walter Elmore, and I'm the chairman of the HUD Veterans Affinity Group. I want to welcome you to our Veterans or VAG Veterans Forum Speaker Series. This is the first in a series of forums that we're going to be doing here from HUD to assist our veterans. I want to say hello to our regional and field offices. I know that you're online. You won't be able to ask questions during this initial speaker series, but you will be able to listen and get a lot from that. Those folks who are calling in, if we have time, we may take a few questions from the call-in, and that depends if we have time. I'm going to get right to what we're going to be talking about because this speaker series is only going to last for an hour. We have a lot of questions have been coming in from our veterans from around the country. And they've been talking about transitioning issues, coming out of the military and transitioning into the civilian work culture. And one of the things that I say to them is that, let's face it, it's not about the civilian culture transitioning and adapting to you. It's about you adapting to the civilian work culture. And that's what you have to do. I have a tendency of saying things like, well, when I was in the military, we did this. And when I was in the military, we did it this way or did it that way. And a good friend of mine said to me one day, he said, well, you know what? You're not in the military anymore. So we don't do it that way. So what we have to do is learn how to do it the way they do it in the civilian culture. So we're going to talk about that transition, and the speaker that we have today is going to give you some pointers on how to make that transition or how to make that transition a little bit easier. So without much further ado, I'd like to introduce to you to our first forum speaker is Colonel John Angevine. Colonel John Angevine is an Iraq-Afghanistan war veteran, so he's paid his dues. He is also a executive fellow for Veterans Affairs at the Brookings Executive Education, the Brookings Institute. And John is going to be talking from the topic of emotional intelligence, a veteran survival kit in a public career, something we can all use, something even I can use. So without much further ado, I'm going to step away, and the next voice that you will hear and next person you will see is Colonel Angevine. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm very grateful that HUD and Walter, oh thanks, got my eyeballs, have invited me here, and very privileged to do so. I would like to start off first and say thank you for your service, and for those that are here and those that are on the conference itself. It's always important to take time to reflect on what we value, our character and our values that we take wherever we go, that were hardened and mettled and tested during our military service, and apply that to our day in and day out life, and to include at work. And so today, I think we're going to have fun. I want to have fun. We're going to do a little bit of biology, some brain surgery. We're going to go to the movies. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk and ask questions during the presentation or even afterwards. But before I get started in the presentation in earnest, just let me talk a little bit about how privileged Brookings Executive Education and Brookings Institution is here to be able to join you to discuss a little bit about what we're doing at Brookings for our veterans. We're conducting research in the veteran's life cycle. It starts when the recruiter shakes the hand, goes into the military life cycle, then we go through this transition almost a bit like driving off a cliff, and into our new civilian careers. The longest running veteran life cycle at the moment is a widow of a Spanish-American war veteran. So you can see, if you look at the bookends, from new recruit to many, many decades later for the veteran's life cycle. But we're going to focus on the veteran's life cycle portion of the professional career aspect of this. We're developing ideas to better integrate veterans into the federal service, and we've gotten some really great ideas that's all made it up to the committees on Veterans Affairs to discuss some of the future concepts that we can bring into legislation and as well into the executive branch that can better serve each and every one of us that are in federal service. Now, through our Master's of Science and Leadership program, our certificates, and our fellows program, we're assisting veterans in their career development preparation. Now, the reason why Brookings Executive Education has a Fellow of Veterans Affairs is to go beyond just saying thank you. We want to take action that demonstrates our gratitude to veterans by having me assist my colleagues and work with all the elements of Brookings Executive Education, the Brookings Institution, and Washington University in St. Louis to create integrated veterans-friendly programs, as well as to assist each and every one of you in maximizing the work, the wealth of experience and leadership talents that veterans can potentially bring to your team. And so we invite you to join us in developing yourself and your veterans as an integral part of your organization. Now, Walter today had asked me to address some of the questions that he had been gathering via email, telephone conversations, and try to help some of our comrades to take a different view about public service. Because I can remember when I was telling some of the folks before we got started about my command sergeant major when I was in command, and I was griping about something, and he reminded me of something. And I can remember when I did my transition, I remember pointing out to everybody, somebody needs to figure that out. Somebody needs to get that VA system figured out. Somebody needs to get that process and this working. That's just somebody. And I was doing that internally to my mind. And I can remember Command Sergeant Major Horner yelling out at me. It's like CSMs normally do, by the way. Sir, and I'll clean it up for the ladies, that's one finger out and three back at you, so what are you going to do? And so this is about us adapting. We're the 1%ers in this country, and we have to take time to regain our personal sovereignty and join the 99%. And that requires for us to take pause, to adapt, and to understand our new context so we can take that wealth of leadership knowledge that we've gained that's been tested in the most arduous, time-pressured bullet cooker that you can imagine, either in high-pressure positions that we've felt by our team or in the heat of combat or in training where lives were at stake or our ability to successfully accomplish the mission goals and objectives, just like we do the federal agencies, maybe put at unnecessary risks. And so when Walter and I were discussing this, I said, you know, I got some survival tips that I always been used, and I learned these through the School of Hard Knocks. But I have several mentors along the way, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention Dr. Fran Johnson, who's one of the faculty members at Brookings Executive Education and also in Philadelphia with Tilios. That was my mentor to kind of help me realize that. And so today we're going to talk about emotional intelligence and that survival kit and some of those tips. But before we can get to that, we do need to lay a solid foundation. So we're going to take a trip to the brain. Okay, so make sure I get this click it. Do I have to just, it's on and click. Can someone help me here? Just click one slide ahead and, oh, there we go, got it. There's our agenda. We wouldn't be a successful presenter with military without an agenda. And so, so we're going to take time to deconstruct some of the complexities of emotional intelligence. I'm going to ask for your patience because it's important to have that foundation so that we can really get the most out of our tips. It worked that time, it did? No? The next slide then. Thank you. So, what is emotional intelligence? Psychologists, researchers, and educators have known for a long time that thoughts and feelings influence each other. And both thoughts and feelings are involved in shaping a person's behavior. Now, brain research in the last 30 years has established that thinking and feeling originate in separate centers of the brain. And the centers have been termed the thinking mind and the emotional mind. Now, the thinking mind is located in the cortex. That's this front part of the brain here. That's the gray matter that you see. And I'll point it out for those here. It's I can barely see that. It's the top of the gray matter right here. Now, deep inside that, and that thinking mind is located in that cortex, and the emotional mind is located in what is known as the limbic system. Now, in particular, it's the amygdala in the limbic system that the structure stores emotional experience that we associate with various events. Now, it's about an almond-shaped size part of the brain, and it's located at the base near the brainstem, not at the brainstem, but near it. And on the diagram, for those that can see that, it's that little round dot with a little blue swag that's moving into it at the base of the brain. And according to brain structure, and I'm not a brain surgeon here, so that our most basic internal instincts and our feelings come from the most rudimentary part of the brain, while that higher level thinking in the system analysis comes from parts of the brain that were developed much later in our development. Now, the amygdala, that structure is the emotional center. And one of its functions, from what we know so far, is to communicate information of the emotional nature to the cortex, especially the frontal lobe area of the cortex. It's where people scratch their forehead, I'm thinking. And so the frontal lobe is then trying to decipher and understand, is taking time, instructing it whether or not to go into action or some type of behavior mode. Now, the prefrontal lobe compares the instructions from the amygdala with the reality of the situation and then decides to either ignore the instructions or to carry out into action. Now, this is an important point. There's three important categories here, and of which one, the latter is one we always face at work. If a person is on drugs, drunk, and this is the important one, stressed out, then the prefrontal lobe may fail to block the instructions from the amygdala so that it gets translated into action irrespective of the reality of the situation. You know, blow your top if you get frustrated. Act on the emotion instead of logic while you're in work. Now, let me go ahead and go a little further and talk about intelligence test scores, commonly known as IQs. And the IQs are based on logic and thinking, and for many years has been considered the most important and critical factor in determining how well or successful an individual is likely to be in life or at work. Now, what's become apparent over the years is that the intelligence test score only explains about a quarter of the factors that account for a person's success in life or work. So that leaves about 3/4 of the factor that requires an explanation. And the work that's been done by Daniel Goleman and his colleagues has shown that missing link in providing a much more accurate explanation of how individuals are likely to succeed at work or in life was the role that's played by the individual's feelings or emotions. And that's why you see the equation as you see it there. IQ, real small, and EQ is outsized in order to equal success. And that research that's offered by Daniel Goleman suggests that individuals who use his or her feelings or emotions intelligently, those are the ones who are more successful in work and life. Now, what that means is that if you have two people that have the same IQ, and one can use his or her emotional intelligence competently, while the other doesn't have the master of those or is incompetent in those emotional intelligence, then the person with that mastery of emotional intelligence is the more successful person. So the bottom line is that if a person wants to achieve their full potential, then it's necessary for him or her to develop the emotional intelligence, and that is to develop a functional balance of heart and mind. Now, unlike intelligence test scores, which are said to be fixed, emotional intelligence can be learned and improved with age. Okay, so much for biology lesson there, right? Next slide here. There we go. Thank you. Now, emotional intelligence is defined as you see here on the slide. It's the capacity for awareness of our own feelings and those of others. It's the ability to motivate ourselves to manage our own feelings well and manage well the emotions in various relationships. Being able to face someone with a painful but necessary truth that's been avoided. It also is defined by dealing with our emotions in such a way that feelings are expressed appropriately, and creating the climate in which people can smoothly work together toward common goals. Next slide. Thank you, sir. So these are the 4 components of emotional intelligence. And having high emotional intelligence doesn't necessarily mean that a person knows how to apply those skills to a particular, for the practicalities of work or life. Many factors during the course of when we grow up play an important part in the development of appropriate or inappropriate use of emotional intelligence skills. Traditional schooling is tendency to focus or emphasize the qualities of thinking, logic. And the qualities of the emotional mind have largely been neglected during our formative years while we're in school. So we count a lot on our community and our families to try to provide that to us. It's therefore necessary for us to tune our emotional skills so that we can use them in an appropriate way in the appropriate context. Now here I'm going to cite one of my favorite authors. Anyone can become angry, and that's easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purposes, and in the right way, this is not easy. And that was written long ago by Aristotle. Now, Dan Goleman and his colleagues identified 4 dimensions or building blocks of the emotional mind. The first 2 come under the umbrella of personal skills, and the last 2 come under what we call social skills. They have a social skill nature. And the dimensions include self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and managing relationships. And the person that can master the first 3 is better positioned to effectively manage relationships. Okay, next slide. So developing the competencies across these 4 main areas is essential for success in life and the workplace. So self-awareness is the ability of an individual to, thank you, sir, to be in tune with his or her feelings, to recognize the impact that his or her feelings have on others. There you go. Thank you. Self-management is the ability to keep negative emotions and impulse behaviors under control and stay calm and unflappable even when there's a stressful situation. It's maintain a clear and focused mind directed at accomplishing the task. Social awareness is the ability to read and sense other people's emotions, empathy, and how they impact on the situation of interest or concern. Okay, relationship management is the ability to influence, guide, and handle other people's emotions. Now, each of these emotions have competencies. And so let me introduce you very quickly to these competencies. With self-awareness, they include emotional self-awareness, accurate self-assessment, and self-confidence. For the self-management within these personal, what I call personal emotional intelligence competencies, includes emotional self-control, transparency, adaptability, achievement, initiative, and optimism. Now let's take a look at the social EI competencies. The first one is social awareness, and that entails empathy, organizational awareness, and service orientation. And the competencies for relationship management is inspirational leadership, influence in developing others, conflict management, and probably what we all strive to have in our day-to-day activities is teamwork and collaboration. So, it's generally accepted that thoughts can induce feelings, and feelings can generate thoughts. Now, for example, many people engage in self-talk. I know fact that I do. And that self-talk is an expression of thought. And so when we're upset, and those are our feelings about something, in turn it leads to more intense feelings in that feedback cycle that we get into. Now, research during the last decade indicates that emotions are experienced well before thinking, and it takes place well before thinking takes place, and it suggests that in general that emotions come before thoughts. Now, it appears then that emotions dictate our thinking, motivate, and mobilize us into action or to behaviors. And consequently, the feelings then direct us to what we want or need, determine our behaviors or actions toward what we want or need, facilitate relationships forming, create bonds between family, community, society, and organizations. We'll talk a little bit about it a little later. Influence how leaders and managers perform in their roles and responsibilities, and affects how leaders' roles is authorized by the followers, the contract, the loyalty that goes back up the chain of command, vice just down the chain of command. And it influences how the team works together. So let's take a look at these into dynamics just a bit. Now, in most organizations, there's a tendency to appoint leaders or managers based on technical expertise and knowledge. Now, the findings by Dan Goleman and his colleagues point out that some leaders and managers appointed on that basis lack the necessary emotional competencies to enable them to lead or effectively manage. The higher an individual moves up in the organization, the more he or she requires people handling skills in addition to the technical or knowledge. So technical and knowledge alone is not enough. Now, the personal and the social skills form the foundation of emotional intelligence. And combining the expertise and the people handling skills lead to leaders that do the things that we want our leaders to do, the ones that we think are exceptional leaders. They listen, they show adaptability, they're empathetic, they offer constructive feedback, they influence and persuade others, they motivate their followers, they work collaboratively, and they help the team create a clear shared vision, and they get the team to work together. So let's take a look at the dimension of EI and teamwork, and this is what we call limbic resonance. Now, emotions are contagious because the brains are wired to connect and to communicate with each other without our awareness. We can sense this. We can, especially my wife and my mom. They know what I'm thinking before I even realize it myself. And so when members of the team work together, they're influenced by each other's emotions at an unconscious level. And the rule of thumb is that on interpersonal skills and communication is about 5% is verbal and 95% is nonverbal, suggesting that most communication among the team is emotional in nature. Now, it seems then that when team members are emotionally intelligent and use emotional skills appropriately, they can create an atmosphere to collaborate at work. And it means that emotional intelligence enables members to open lines of communication, listen to each other, both verbally and non-verbally, to form good working relationships and networks, to share information they discovered, enabling the task to be done quickly, and be adaptable and empathetic to one another. So, all right, guys. Yes, there are more than two emotions. I'm okay, I'm not okay. And there's more than 3,000 words that are core words that describe the types and intensity of emotions. Now, so my first question out to the audience that are here, or if you're able to speak on the phone, how many basic emotions do humans have? Anybody have a guess? Please, don't leave me hanging. Yes, sir.
12.
Basic emotions, too high. 10. Too low. 7, 4, all right. Depending on what, 5, depends on what you're reading. 5, 6, or 7, depends how you divide the pie. So for today's model, we're going to talk 6. Okay? So, all right. Lucky winners. Hang on a second. Good one. Good one. There's 2 winners on that. All right. So I gave away some nice thermos mugs on a hot day. There's nothing in them, though, but you'll enjoy those. So, yeah, there's about 6 basic emotions for what we're talking here. And you can divide that up. So, can you name the emotions? Anybody want to name those 6 basic emotions? Yes, sir. Happiness. Next. Sad. Fear. Check. Almost. Come on. Anger. Yes, because jealousy is a form of anger. Okay. Excitement. Almost. Surprise. Yes, indeed. Next one. Disgust. Indeed. All right. Very good. Everyone did a very, very good job today. So, because you got the hard one. The last one is always the hard one. So, because we're all senior moments here now. So.
Why on your chart does it also say bad?
Well, like I said, depending on the model you use and how you want to break it out, that will determine your perspective. So there's no right or wrong, but it's it's a model that we happen to be on the chart, and I'll get to that here in just a second to kind of unpack that a bit. But it's having the vernacular and the framework to understand what it is. Okay, so these emotions are there to take care of you, and so please let me introduce to you the emotions. If we can go ahead and click on
Heads up, everybody! It's showtime!
Grab shell, dude!
Ready?
Ready!
Oh boy, oh boy! Let's go!
Look it.
You got a problem, buddy? Do you?
Where is my super suit?
Spit that out right now!
You mean you don't like me?
So long, partner.
I'm joy. This is sadness. That's anger. This is disgust. And that's fear.
Come on, group hug. You too, Anger.
Don't touch me.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to introduce you to the emotions. Okay, now let's take a look at because you're back to your question earlier, is identifying the emotions and review the intensity, and that's where we start getting bifurcations and polarization within certain subgroups, depending on how you want to characterize the intensity of each of the emotions. So as we think about the basic emotions, then we visualize and we become aware of the subtleness of each of these basic emotions. And if you take a look at your handout on your pinwheel, the one here, for sake of clarity, I took off some of the titles. This one is much more extensive than what's on the screen. And you can see that the basic emotions that we discuss, and then as they go out outer rings, the intensity decreases, and then we're able to gain a vernacular of our basic intelligence. So let's go ahead and let's meet one of these emotions that we often see at work. Okay? If we can click on the pinwheel.
I'm Louis Black, and I play Anger in Disney Pixar's Inside Out. Who's Anger? What? He's that feeling in the back of your head when you stub your toe, or you end up stuck in traffic, or have your dinner interrupted by a telemarketer. Hang on, I'm getting a little worked up here.
Breathe, find your happy place.
Those other emotions are all too touchy-feely. I'm sad. I'm scared. Can I say that curse word now? Anger is all about getting the job done. Time to take action. So don't get in his way. Move, otherwise he might explode.
You wouldn't.
Oh, but I would. Seriously. He only does it because he really cares, though. Promise. I arrest my case.
All right? And then, so we have 3,000 words in the core words in the dictionary that describes our emotions. And we introduce these manifold of words that describe our feelings, knowing what to call your emotions, help you identify what you're feeling, and then it gives you a chance to manage them. And so I think on the back side of the pinwheel is a whole array of those terms and words. Now, I suggest you keep this at your desk and test yourself out. Be aware of when you're starting to feel this in the gut or in your heart, because that's where it's going to start. Your body's reaction: increase in blood pressure, come flush, temperature increase, the room goes dim, lips gets pierced. There's physical reactions. Register those. Understand that when you go around each of those basic emotions or within those intensities, what's happening to you, and then record that so you can identify it on a moment's notice when it's starting to happen to you. And that's the first step of controlling. It's my reminder of time here, so I dropped my clock. Okay, so be aware of them. And that's the first step. So what happens when you leave one or more of your emotions at home, or you attempt to use other emotions to either mask or to replace your other feelings? And because our minds are so attuned to emotions, others really pick up on it. So let's watch. If you can click on the middle chart, just.
Riley is acting so weird. Why is she acting so weird?
What do you expect? All the islands are down.
Joy would know what to do.
That's it. Until she gets back, we just do what Joy would do.
Great idea. Anger, fear, disgust. How are we supposed to be happy?
Hey, Riley, I've got good news. I found a junior hockey league right here in San Francisco, and get this, tryouts are tomorrow after school. What luck, right?
Hockey?
Uh-oh, what do we do?
Guys, here, you pretend to be Joy.
Won't it be great to be back out on the ice?
Oh yeah, that sounds fantastic.
What was that? That wasn't anything like Joy.
Because I'm not Joy?
Yeah, no kidding.
Did you guys pick up on that?
Sure did. Something's wrong.
Should we ask her?
EI Council.
But keep it subtle so she doesn't notice. So, how was the first day of school?
She's probing us.
I'm done. You pretend to be Joy.
What? Okay,
It was fine, I guess. I don't know. Oh, very smooth. That was just like Joy.
Okay, if you can go ahead and click on the Brookings bar and we'll pick, there you go. Thank you. So, as you can see, it's, when you're masking, people can tell. And so it's, and many times the person that doesn't get it is the person that's actually doing it. Because they're not, sometimes we don't develop that self-awareness, and it takes a while to do that. Hence my challenge to you. Note and register your emotions where you're at right now. And so I asked you, each one of you, to check yourself and then think about what it is and write your emotion down on the notepad that I provided for you. And then we'll ask you to do it again after the brief, and then you can do your own analysis and comparison. Hopefully you're exceedingly happy now and very pleasant and ready to move, rock and roll on, right? Well, that comes at the end of the day. Okay. Now, it's using the 4 core emotional skills that we discussed. And when we're able to get that in harmony and bring those all to bear for ourselves, then we widen the aperture to understand the levels of system. Now, from individual to organization, everything undergoes the process of change or transformation. Regardless of what system that we're focusing on, when we make this process more conscious, we're able to exercise more choice and have the capacity to deliver on our intent. And also in your handout, you can see, and each one of these in these details is the level of organization that we have, from me all the way to our community, with your work units all nested up into each one of those. Each one has a different perspective. Now, using our 4 core emotions, we also open the aperture up under the cycle of experience. And then that's on the handout here. I provided you the handout on the next 2 models, so you can dig into a little more detail and see that more clearly than you can on the slide from that distance. Now what you see here is the Gestalt cycle of experience. And it helps you frame the process of change, for your personal change all the way up through each of those levels of the system. And the cycle of experience describes how, either individually or as a group, people become aware of what's going on at any moment. That's the sensation. And how they mobilize energy to take some action that allows them to deal constructively with the possibilities by the new awareness. Now, the key to enrich sensation, out of the many experiences and feelings that are going on at any given moment, that tells us what's important, exciting, or engaging. In other words, it finds the message in all the noise. What's the important message that we're trying to deal with? And you're sorting through that. It is when we connect to these sensations that we mobilize our energy, align our actions, and make changes that over time add real meaning to our lives and our work. And that's using the 4 core skills to get at that cycle of change. Now, most of us don't spend enough time in awareness or in sensation awareness and energy, and it's far too tempting to leap from sensation straight into action. But that's why most of us find it difficult to commit to change. We want to change. I want to lose 20 pounds, or I'm going to be nice at work today. I'm not going to blow up at the guy, my boss, and give him a hard time, or whatever it happens to be that you're dealing with, and you want to change. You want to embrace that. I'm not going to rouse my kids out of bed with a glaring look that he slept in 2 minutes late. Taking time to sit with what we're feeling allows those feelings to seep slowly into our awareness and how we build the energy and the momentum to carry us through the cycle of experience. It builds that momentum that we need to help us do something that's difficult and hard to change us. Next is using the 4 core emotional skills to widen the aperture with an intentional change. And that's the bottom model on the handout that I gave out to you there, so you can see that in a little more detail. Now, significant and substantial change that occurs only when people engage in the process of intentional change. You got to want to change. And the process is really a series of discoveries about oneself, one's hopes, dreams, current situation, the plans, and the supportive relationships that help us along the way. The main driving force for the model is self-directed learning, having an open mindset, self-directed learning. Now, within the open mindset means you're not afraid to fail, and you don't mind demonstrating that you don't know something in front of your peers, your subordinates, or your superiors, or your family members. Having a fixed mindset makes you more risk-averse because you're afraid to show that you don't know something or fail. That model, the fixed mindset model, stifles learning and experimentation and erodes self-confidence. The self-exploration starts when developing a strong or positive, energizing image of your ideal self. And that is what I want to be in the future. And then secondly, I want to focus on the accurate image of where I'm at now, my real self. And then when I take those two images, my ideal self and my actual self, my real self, and I superimpose them, it reveals gaps of what I want to be in the future and with what I am now. And those gaps direct the individual to the skills that you need to learn in order to reduce or to eliminate the gaps. Now, going through these 5 steps is essential for developing emotional intelligence and emotional intelligent leadership capabilities. And it also requires an ongoing commitment for self-change and growth. So, promise, I got 4 tips. If I could give you any more, I have lots of them. I got 4 survival tips for veterans in a professional workforce. First is use the STAR model prior to beginning a difficult or a stressful conversation. Now, the STAR model is stop, think, act, and reflect. And before you go into a difficult conversation or a stressful conversation, you need to ask yourself certain questions. You want to ask, what's the purpose, and what do you want to accomplish out of that conversation? What's the ideal outcome? What are the assumptions that you're making about the other person? What are the hot button issues? What is my attitude toward the conversation contributing to the intended outcome? And practice or rehearse that conversation before you get into the conversation. Then when you get into the presentation part of that, then you want to get into the mindset that is constructive, that gets you to the intended outcome. So many times that means remaining calm and professional and trying to carry that mindset through that discussion. Then you want to approach that conversation with an attitude of inquiry and discovery, because many times the arguments start because the person you're engaging doesn't know or doesn't believe that you understand them, that you've listened to them, and they're looking for a validation, or at least not. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but they're looking for that validation. And we need to be mature enough and self-aware enough and have all those core elements of emotional intelligence to bear to manage that relationship at that given time in that difficult conversation. So people want to be acknowledged that they've heard, but you still want to advocate for your position. And then you want to state your position concisely and clearly. And then if you're not able to solve the problem, then you go back to inquiry in order to ask more questions about what the objections might be. So let's take a look at some of the survival tips that break that difficult conversation down. Okay, so what I call survival tip number 2, critical discourse. The key is listening and learning from others. That's what's critical here. And I take critical discourse and divide it into 2 categories, advocacy and inquiry. So let's focus on advocacy first. That's the act and process of supporting a cause or a proposal. So let's walk down through that real quick of what you're trying to do and what some of those open lines might be during a critical discourse advocacy. Now, what makes it critical discourse is that you're wanting to listen after you get done with your at the end of your part of the conversation and getting into a dialogue. First, you state your view. And an opening line like that might be, I think that we should do ... whatever it is that you're looking to do. Provide the data on which it is based. The data that I base this on is ... Clear and concise. And you explain how you got from your data to your conclusion. I reasoned that ... And then this is the most important part of critical discourse. Encourage critique and questioning of your view by simply asking, what's your reaction? What do you think? So during that critical discourse, keep calm and continue a constructive discourse. So let's take a look at inquiry. Inquiry is the act of asking questions in order to gather or collect information. Now, inquiry, I got 3 basic steps with some opening lines that correspond to each one of those. Asked about the other's view and their data. How do you see it differently? Maybe an opening line. Probe the other person's reasoning behind their view. What leads you to that conclusion? What prevents you from doing Now keep in mind, the way you ask is as important as what you ask. So you have to have a grasp on that as well. And then the most important part that makes this critical discourse, invite a challenge to your understanding of their view. And that would be something like, my understanding of your view is XYZ, what have I missed? And this way you can get into problem solving at that point because they believe that they've been heard. Okay? Survival tip 3 within applying the emotional intelligence for veterans in a public service is the 60-second rule. Now, how many people have been to, by a show of hands, have been to meetings that have been go on forever and never say anything? Raise your hand if you've been in one of those meetings. I only see everybody's hands up. Okay, one shy one. He's laughing. Okay, so let's curtail some of those meetings. And if you're, what you should do, if you really have that problem, then just post these rules and say, hey, boss, or hey, this is the rules we're going to use. We're going to try to do something constructive, and everyone's going to agree to these rules, right? So give it a try and see. So let's go through the 60-second rule. No wind-ups or introductions. Lead with what your main point is. For example, you would open line, I think, ... whatever it happens to be. And you're allowed only one elaboration. One elaboration only. Why you think it. And so, I think X because Y. And then stop, take 5 breaths, and someone else will be talking. Okay? Now, the results of that, it increases the impact of people, of the people around you, on the people around you, because they heard you. They did not tune you out, nor did you tune them out. Okay? So let's go to the last survival tip for today. Commitment to lifelong learning. That's probably what the hardest commitment. And that's why I went into the cycle of change, the intentional change model. Because that's where we're going to look at how do we get in an open mindset in a context that we don't always get to choose and get the most out of the experience for ourselves, for our team, for our colleagues, and for both either higher, lower, or on the same level. Now, I refer you to your packets, and if you can go to the Brookings Executive Education booklet on page 32, there you will see a crosswalk of the OPM competencies. Now, within the federal service, OPM and the agency discuss and evaluate potential through the executive core qualifications and the associated competencies. There's 24 of them altogether. Now, at Brookings Executive Education, we invite you to join us in developing yourself and your veterans as leaders, and to be innovative change leaders, to be the go-to person who solves complex problems, to become a competent professional leader known for achieving results. And this is an investment in yourself and your agency's mission, goals, and objectives. And so with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. We have 10, 15 minutes left. 10 minutes left. There we go. So, questions? Yes, ma'am, please. So the question is, are the questions that are being offered, are they strictly for military personnel? No. They're applicable to whether a military, a veteran, or a non-veteran. It's because people are people. What makes this particularly important to veterans is that we've been socialized. All of us that have been in the military have gone through basic training. We've all come down to one common denominator, then we rebuilt within our services, values, and our services culture. But by and large, and this is not to be critical because we have built a great nation in 230 years, the most powerful nation economically and military on the planet that has ever been created on this planet. And so civilians, they got it figured out. And we may not always understand as veterans exactly what's going on, but they've got it figured out. But by and large, with veterans, we come out of the service with an us mindset. It's because, and in that us mindset, it is the mission, goals and objectives, they come first, and then we make subordinate to that mission, goals, and objectives, our personal interest. And then when we get our orders to nowhere, be our separation papers or retirement papers, then we regain our personal sovereignty. Then we're then gauging through that prism, that lens, about the us. when civilians take a different role as part of their independence and the part of the way they approach problem solving and the way they deal. It's about me. And then how does that mission, goal, and objectives impact me? And if it's adverse, well, then I'll look for a way not to do it. I'll look for a way to obfuscate if I have to, because it's going to have a negative impact on me. So you have two approaches that are coming together that have friction. Doesn't mean one's better than the other. They just both exist. And so for veterans, when we come in, it's us understanding how to influence and to the art of problem solving all the stakeholders to get them to come along with and add to the portfolio or to the facets of leadership. There's no authoritarian or dictatorial type of leadership. It's about consensus building and collaboration. So how do we get that and add that to our facet of leadership that may not be well practiced depending on where we were at and how we served in the military? And that's why I bring this particular aspect up for veterans. Yes, sir. Yes.
I just realized what it is. You know, it being in federal service, anger said, I care, in your little film.
Right.
When you look at that seventh emotion,
Bad?
it's bad. It's not caring anymore.
Yes.
It's the emotion of you're so stressed, you just don't care.
Right. And that's called one of the 7 deadly sins. Anybody want to guess which one it is? Sloth. Total absence of caring. And that's very frustrated civilians we run. When we perceive, we run across that. It's very, very frustrating for us. And we don't realize it. Remember, our limbic system, our amygdala, operates at lightning fast. It's a survival response for us. And what we're trying to do is check that to give us time to understand the context we're in, and so that we can analyze and look at that so that we can draw out in a critical discourse way, finding out why the person may have a bad day, may have cancer, they got a flat tire on the way to work, or the budget just got cut and doesn't know how to take care of everybody that he's responsible for. And we inquire and unpack that and see what that is, opposed to jumping the ladder of inference, and then drawing the conclusions based on that. Yes, ma'am. Yes, Rosemary.
My husband was a Marine, so we're trying to start up a veteran day center where they come and sit and relax, watch television. And we are going to use just what we have talked about, RAP, that is Wellness Recovery Action Plan, which just talks the same as what we just explained here. So I'm very, very much excited, and maybe when we set up our center, we will still use the RAP and so how do we incorporate that into our center? Because it's very, very, very important to make sure the homeless veterans, focus more on the homeless veterans, and they end up homeless going through what you have said. So how do we get that information to?
Well, the program or what we discussed here today comes out of many people's research in mind. So I'm just reflecting. I'm not the creator of this thought. I'm just a super user or trying to be at some point in time. School of Hard Knocks for me, and some formal training along the way, and education. At Brookings Executive Education, we have all these programs and details with real experts that either the Brookings faculty there or the Washington University in St. Louis Olin Business School faculty that do peer research and then bring that content to practice. And through our master's program, Master of Science in Leadership, through our certificate programs, you can have access to that. And that's in the book, and you can array that. If you want to have a more general conversation, my card's in the packet, and please feel free to contact me. My email address is jangevine, I spell Juliet Alpha November Golf Echo Victor India November Echo, JANGEVINE @ Brookings.edu. And so feel free, to contact me, and then we can get into details of the specifics. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so basically, I was looking at a couple of the courses that are in here. My dilemma is I'm not a veteran, and I am not a part of the military. My dad, when I look at other military personnel, and I look at my dad, there is no similarity.
I'm gonna put it that way there. They always appear, they're stand-up type. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. You know, guys might not get it, but anyway.
So someone else have, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Kind of go off of what, I'm not prior military, I don't have military experience. But I can find some similarities in that, like with first responders maybe. I used to be an investigator for child protective services. So I did that for 2 years, and it's really high and intense.
Okay.
And so you have to be very efficient in that. And then when you leave that, because now I work with the Department of Justice, and it doesn't seem as, there's not that intensity. And because there's not that intensity anymore, everybody's not on top of things as you expect them. So when I go into meetings, I'm like, because that's the way we ran meetings.
Okay.
And then when I go in there and everybody's like, take hours, and you're like, why am I here? You know?
The funny thing is, the civilians who work for the Department of Defense, it rubs off. I'm not prior military, but I spent 3 years working for the Department of the Navy. And it really, you start to adapt to the ways of your executive officer, your commanding officer, you know, the chiefs. I mean, it kind of rubs off.
It's a limbic reaction for sure.
So I agreed when I worked under someone who was in the Navy. I agreed wholeheartedly with that. However, you know, I think different branches of service, different things. I also worked at Walter Reed, and it was a total different thing because they were so standoffish. We were peons, and, you know, that was it. Okay, so basically the question that I have, I heard you state that for military, you guys are more like us, and civilians, it's more like me. And from my point of view, it's the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
So what I am trying to do is to understand that comment of you saying it's about us. I do realize that you guys lay your lives on the line selflessly.
Well, let me say that I wasn't, I'm most certainly not trying to disparage any portion, veteran or non-veteran. I'm just, that particular comment is those that are veterans, they clearly understand and see and they have affinity to that type of role. Trust me, we have lots of military members and service members that are about me. We run across that a lot. But it's about the values that each of the military services instill in their ideal. Now, with your real, the real person aligned to those values, many of those values, it'll take a lifetime to realize them. And so it's a continuum, and everyone's on the continuum, which is why every organization has values. They have a vision, they have a mission statement, and they have their core values. This organization here has values. And you know what those values are, you adopt those values, and those values become what you aspire to be. And if you adopt those values, then you are actually transformed to an us, an open learning mindset. So every federal service member possesses that. Our federal public servants are wholly unappreciated, underpaid, haven't had pay raises for a while, for example, but they're there for us. They're constantly doing that hard lifting to get the outcomes that their agencies ask them to do with not enough time, not enough people, and most certainly not enough money or resources to do that. And so that continuum, it's about adopting those agency values and living to that. Recognizing when we depart from that ideal self to our real self, and if your actions and your words don't align, then there's a mismatch in there. And that was really what I'm glad you asked the clarification, and that's the real challenge I'm asking for yourselves. Many times veterans, and the ones I've talked to, and most certainly I'll speak for myself, I've done this, I think I got it. I think I'm there. I got 100% of the values. I got 100% of self-actualization. I'm wrong, by the way. I think I nailed it down. I look around at all this chaos that I don't understand, and I'm trying to interact with it, and I'm trying to apply what made me successful in the military to the whole world. And I'm the one. That's what I'm saying. We have to adapt. We have to change to the rest of the 99%. And I'm trying to bring understanding of what for me is chaos. Meanwhile, I think I'm doing a great job, and the civilians looking and go, look at that knucklehead. Oh my gosh. And that's the problem that veterans are running through. And here's some statistical data to support what I'm saying. Is that right now we're having 250,000 veterans leave the service every single year, And for the next 5 years, that's 1 million military members are going to come veterans over the next 5 years. And they're entering the workforce. And we've increased the workforce from about 15% veteran to about currently today about 30% veteran. President Obama has done a tremendous job in putting emphasis on the federal government hiring veterans as well as corporate America. So he hasn't stopped just at the federal government. Of that, what's occurring is that veterans are changing jobs once every year for the first 3 years. The average longitudinal study from baby boomers, which started in the 1950s, was just about ready to conclude because because you got to look at longitudinal study runs about 40 years because that's the first one they got done. A baby boomer changed jobs about once every 8-10 years. The millennials, when you adjust for the type of technology we have in place and the way the cultural viewpoints that millennials have, they're changing jobs about once every 5 years. A veteran coming out of the Iraq, Afghanistan veteran coming out of the service is changing jobs once every year for the first 3 years. That tells you something. That speaks loudly for us. So our retention rate within federal service are not very good. And it's a metric, it's not objective. It's a metrics of how we approach and integrate veterans within our career development planning and our career development pathway. In the federal service, that's still being developed. It's there, but we got to use the IDP and the coaching and mentoring to help our veterans reach across and help them bring into our culture. Yes, sir.
But the military fosters that. The military mind is that I'm only going to be there 2 or 3 years, and then I'm going to rotate to a different position. So you bring that into the.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I would go that far in a generalization because depending on where you're at in the military. Right. There's lots of rotations. But right, it is true that military has a tendency to rotate positions. I will tell you that having rotated the last 5 years of my job, I had 5 jobs. And trust me, it wasn't because I wanted to rotate every year. And actually, I was looking forward to not doing that anymore. And I was seeking a place where I can be there and not change. I'm just speaking for me. I don't think that's inherent within anybody because they're already coming in. It's veterans that come out of the service are already in an unstable position. They're looking for stability. They're looking because they got to pay the mortgage, keep food on the table, and they got to keep clothes on the kids. And so they're looking for stability, and they're very used to that. No matter how many times they changed the job, you know it was the same for my 32 years that I was in the service? I was getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. It didn't matter what was going on. I knew I was getting paid. And if I changed jobs 16 times in 1 month, I was still getting a paycheck. And that element of stability is not necessarily there. And that's the problem we're really trying to get at. Yes, ma'am.
I found the presentation very interesting. Actually, I give emotional intelligence classes here at the agency.
Oh, wonderful.
So getting back to your point about what I found is I'm not military, but what I found is that, being a civilian person, we have a lot of choices. And so when you're trying to move things forward, they choose to come, choose not to come. When military, it's swift. If you don't do something, there's swift punishment. So it's that conformity because there's swift punishment. And I think when the military come to a civilian agency, they're like, why aren't everyone falling in line? And now when you're in a civilian world, you have to deal with the emotions, which that wasn't a factor. It was about falling in line. It wasn't about if your cat died the morning before. It was about whether you're at your post doing what you need to do regardless of what. It's not about whether your child's birthday is this weekend or whatever happens. So I think that is the male. So you're coming into a construct where you have people that have choices. Maybe they'll get on board, whether they're not get on board. They won't get on board. And to move that influence, to get everybody on board, to have that leadership and that vision, so people go the extra mile on their own, as opposed to if I step out of line, I'm going to the break or whatever happens, very real. So I think the emotional intelligence is bridging that gap.
It's a Thomas Kilmann. The military is full of competition. You know, it's command and control. Your vice admiral gives an order, and the captains all comply. So it's that kind of an approach. The problem is when you move that into the private sector, where you're dealing with civilians, you have to have consensus-based approaches.
Right.
You have to pull people in, and it's not based on rank. So it's a whole different.
Absolutely. You were talking about the circle of influence. Even though someone may have rank, if you will, they may not have the influence to move something forward, which is different.
Well, I think this is a healthy discussion that I hope that you carry on within HUD, and if I can be part of that, I'd be happy to do so. If anyone here would like me to come out and brief their particular part of the organization, I'm readily available. Just let me know. I know we're hitting close to time, are we not? And so thank you again. Thank you for your service to all of our veterans. And my last word of wisdom is, remember, we're the ones that have to adapt to our new context and be agile and fluid enough to embrace that change for ourselves. Thank you so much for today, and let me know if I can do anything for you.